Yo, what up y'all, IntraVenus here, back with another episode. Today I've brought the all-new REVO K101 Plus, which has actually been out for a long time, but Anbernic has just released, as of a couple days ago, a refresh on this product. And the new one is like a bluish purple color. I just happened to have picked this one up. This is the last one they had on their official store on AliExpress in the older color variation here before the refresh. From what I understand, the only thing they've changed is the actual purple color or whatever. Not much has changed. It also says the REVO on the front. I kind of like this one better. It doesn't have any logo on the front at all. But you'll see here, if you've never seen one of these before, it is a Game Boy Advance clone. It says right there on the back, GBA hardware clone. We got an interesting logo and name going on there. Maxow88 Studio or something. I'm not even sure what that's about. Anbernic actually somehow acquired this product from another company that made it originally, so they've rebranded it under their name, but they still put this REVO 101 stuff on the consoles. I don't know about the new purple one. Maybe it'll have Anbernic written on it in a clearer spot, but it doesn't seem to. So anyhow, inside this box we've got a video cable as well as a USB cable. Unfortunately, it's not HDMI out, but you know, that's alright, I guess. We've got an older style USB cable here, and that's because this thing has been out for a long time, but not many people talk about it. This screwdriver is just so you can change the battery if you need to. We got a manual here, which is actually important, and we'll talk a little bit more about this later in the video, but there's some stuff in here that you'll want to know. You'll want to read this for sure before you just go turning it on trying to do things. It'll be helpful. And you'll see it's got a K card, and then the K card is just like an easy flash card, but it's made specifically for this device, and it plays Game Boy Advance games, but it could also play other consoles too, including Game Boy, Game Boy Color. We got a screen protector here, which is important, and this device is very reminiscent of one of Anbernic's earlier devices that I have. It was the first one that I got, the 351P, RG351P. Except for it doesn't have the analog sticks. It's got a cartridge slot for actual Game Boy cartridges. So here we are in the present day. I did spend a couple days with this to make sure I liked it. I wanted to talk about it and make sure I kind of understood everything that was going on so I could explain it to you. Now, we're not going to cover this manual yet, but there are a lot of shortcuts that you'll want to memorize. They're not too difficult to memorize, but little things to change settings, to save the game, access your menus, all that kind of stuff. And so this is the little case that it came with, which is nice. It's slender, it's firm. Unfortunately, it's so slender that you can't even fit a Game Boy Advance game in here and close it. It feels like it's gonna crush up against it. That's unfortunate, because I wish it would hold a few games in here, because this, yes, it does play Game Boy Advance games. It's got this cartridge slot on the back, and as you saw there on my unboxing, when you turn it on, it actually displays a Game Boy logo when there's no cart in there. It's got the sound and everything. It's like you're dealing with an actual Game Boy or Game Boy Advance, which is pretty thrilling to me, I think so. Now, recently, Russ made a post about this over on Retro Game Core. I'm sure some of y'all have seen his channel. He kind of trash talked this thing, said he was given one a long time ago and he refused to make a video on it because he thought it was so bad it wasn't worth playing Game Boy Advance games on. He also said that you couldn't play them in the actual screen ratio as the original 1:1 format for GBA games, which you actually can. I don't know if you just didn't do the research or what, but you could change the aspect ratio on here. So before we go ahead and talk about this K card, I wanted to put in a couple actual Game Boy Advance games, because that's really where this thing shines and its main purpose. Now, this isn't for everyone. If you're getting this to emulate a bunch of games, especially more than Game Boy Advance, you're better off going somewhere else. What this is, it hits a sweet spot for collectors, people who still have their old games, even if they're not collecting them anymore, they're Game Boy Advance games, and they want to be able to play the original cartridges. You know, sometimes you don't want to take your Game Boy Advance out because maybe at this point you've souped it up so much it's worth a couple $100, and you know, this thing you can get for $75 or so. And that might sound a little steep to some when you're comparing it to other devices that can emulate Game Boy Advance. But there aren't very many options at all to play Game Boy Advance cartridges, physical cartridges anymore. There's just a few. You know, I think the Analog Pocket can do it. That's like, what, $300, $500, you get the metal one. Aside from that, we've got Hyperkin's Retron 5 and their little Game Boy clone box. It's a little box. I'll put it up here on the screen. I don't remember the name of it. But that is a consolizer for the Game Boy Advance, basically. And there's a couple other things that are little console versions, where it's basically like someone took the guts out of a Game Boy Advance and they put it in this console box, and you can plug in a Super Nintendo controller. That's all fine and good. Those are all more expensive options than this. Even if you get a regular Game Boy Advance that has not been modified, you're probably going to spend somewhere around $75 maybe for it. You know, you'll be lucky if you get one for $50. And so, for example, here we have an actual game. This is not a repro or anything. I've put it in here to show you that it reads the games, but also we've got this little button here up top, and it, first of all, it does do brightness control. This does a lot of things, this little button. It's a multi-function button. So you have 8 levels of brightness here that you can cycle through. If you press it and down at the same time, you change your aspect ratio there. And we can go to the original. That's the 1:1, which is small. You don't want to look at it like that. And then, you know, you could do full screen. People a lot of times won't want to do this because it's stretching it slightly out of proportion. You're not looking at the original aspect ratio of the console, but as far as I'm aware, this is the sweet spot right there. That's the good. That's 1:1, isn't it? But like doubled. This thing, it looks really good. I think it sounds good. It adds a little more of a darker tone to some of the audio, but not in a bad way, I don't think. I think it kind of gives the audio a little more body, you might say. So, what we're going to do here is we're going to try out a couple carts. We're going to play a couple games next to each other with an actual modified Game Boy Advance. I have my Game Boy Advance here. This is from SoCal Game Boy that I ordered custom from SoCalGameBoy.com. And this is, you know, this is one of your options. This is kind of like the option to go for playing Game Boy Advance games. But you might either not have this option, you don't want to spend the money on this option, or you might want a secondary option, and that's where this handheld falls into play. It's very unique. There's not a whole lot of things like this. I mean, there really aren't. Another thing that you might enjoy here is that it's got a larger D-pad than the original Game Boy Advance, which is kind of small in my opinion. It's a little bit of a small D-pad, and so this feels like it's made more for adult hands, kind of. Plus you get this, you still get the horizontal landscape viewing angle there, and holding it side by side instead of like a vertical format, which I can appreciate more than the Analog Pocket. So let's go ahead and pop in the K card, because the K card turns it into a little emulation station. It gives you a different splash screen right at the front, which is the REVO K101 Plus. The revolution has started. And so what I've done here is I've gone in and created my own folders. If you get one of these, it comes with, depending on the size card you get, you might not get one with the card at all. You can format your own in that. There are ways online that you could find that tell you how to make your own card if you lose it or something like that, or if it just doesn't come with one. As long as you get the K card, you put your micro SD card in there, get it set up. Mine came with 900 Game Boy Advance games, and they were all just in a list, like so. It's going to take just a second to load there because I've put a folder now. Because there was no folder before, and I heard that this thing could do more than just Game Boy Advance. So I went in on my own and created folders and added some of the other consoles that it can also emulate. So this thing can do Game Boy, Game Boy Advance, Game Boy Color, Genesis or Mega Drive, Game Gear, NES, PC Engine. Sort of. PC Engine is very slow. You'll find that these other game consoles aren't really that great, though Game Boy is pretty neat. So let's go ahead and turn on some games side by side with the Game Boy Advance here so we can get an idea of sound and visual fidelity. So there's the volume turned all the way up on this one. This is modified with a better speaker than your usual Game Boy Advance. Now, here is the K101. And it's important to note that I'm running a ROM on this one, and this one's a cart. So, I mean, we could swap them out. It'd probably sound the same. Sometimes ROMs have bad audio, though, but this one has a little bit of a, almost like a Sega Genesis body to it, if you can hear that. Like a 16-bit or 8-bit subwoofer. This one's got like a little bit of a higher pitch to it, just slightly. And I think I like the slightly lower pitch one, actually. I think I like the K101's audio better, you know. And right now we are looking at it at full screen too, and so you get an idea of maybe how it is changing the aspect ratio. See how Samus data is a little taller. So let's go ahead and hit the shortcut to do that. And now we're looking at a great render. You know, it's 1-to-1. I don't know what Russ was talking about, really. But this, sure, it's not for everyone. I can understand not recommending this to somebody who doesn't play actual cartridges, because you don't want to get this if you're not going to want to do the cartridges at all. Because you can get a flash card and a Game Boy Advance or whatever and do it this way if you want to go, you know, what we're doing here over here. But this is for people who play cartridges. That's all I can say. I mean, it's got the added bonus of coming with its own version of a flash card where you can load up all your games, and it comes with a bunch preloaded. So if you don't want to tote your carts around, you can just bring one around. But you can also bring the carts around, and so, you know, if you hit this top button and L, you get a mid-game screen, and you could do things like turn on cheats for the games. They all have a built-in list of cheats. Mine has 900 games. They all seem to have cheats. I don't do cheats, but this is all kind of fun and easy. You just turn them on like a freaking old school Game Shark or Game Genie. You know what I mean? You got auto fire mode you can turn on. It's got real-time capabilities, which can be turned on or off using this and pressing up in the shortcut. It even says that you can turn on and off real-time capabilities using the cartridges as well as emulation. I haven't been able to test that out too much fully, but I really need to know what y'all think about this. So we'll do all the gameplay here at the end of the video. I do want you to keep your instruction manual a little bit if you get this before just tossing it out, because you're going to want to know how some of this works. I came on here to double check to see what other type of consoles this played, because it didn't come with any other ROMs, or it doesn't tell you how to put them on or anything. So what I've done is I put some files in zip, I put some files that aren't zipped. It says it supports zip files, and it does. It unzips them. You can play the zip files or the non-zip files. And I've added a variation of files to test here, so we're going to go through them. It says it also plays music and text files, whatever you want to do there. The main thing that you want to remember here is these shortcuts. But actually, for the shortcuts, you don't really need the manual, because there is a place here in the menu where it'll show you the shortcuts. So let's return to our game list here. So if we hit the R trigger, or shoulder button rather, we've got options. And in here you can adjust your scaling. If you want to do it this way, you can check an actual number for your LCD brightness instead of just tapping the button and guessing. You can change your TV scaling, and whether you have an NTSC or P.O.L setup, and save your settings or whatever. You can go back in here in the help. They got all the shortcuts listed, so that's pretty sweet. Let's go ahead and pop in some games, and we'll play some on here, and then we'll wrap up the video. So here we have a Game Boy game, and it does these borders like Super Game Boy, I guess that's what it's doing, and it actually gives you Pokemon borders. And then this is a Pokemon ROM hack, but I guess because it's like a Pokemon ROM hack, it still recognizes the Pokemon-ness of it and gives you these sweet borders. So this is Red++ version, and yeah, heck, it seems to play Game Boy just fine. Maybe not the best way to play it, but you can. You know, you're looking at, you can imagine like a Game Boy Micro or something like that, the type of screen you got here. So yeah, I mean, we're not going to play this Pokemon game yet, but we are going to play it on the channel, and possibly in its physical form if I could find it. So let's check out the next game. Some Game Boy Color. Once again, we got Pokemon borders. This is not a ROM hack, though. This is gold. And so, yeah, it seems like this is working fine. But let's put on something that's a little more noticeable. Pokemon Pinball. You know, I gotta say, this seems to be running great. Is it running slow? I don't think so. I think this game is just kind of, at least starts out pretty slow. It's a slower pinball game. Speeding up there a little bit. So Game Boy Color. It works. A Sega Genesis, I put in a .md, a .bin, and a zip file, and it just didn't seem to recognize any of those. I thought it did Sega Genesis or Mega Drive, but I couldn't get it working. Here's some Game Gear, though. And it's funny, all of these start with the Game Boy introduction splash screen at first, so this is like the Game Boy Sega Game Gear here. Ooh, that's some good audio. This is Sonic Chaos, and you can adjust the ratio on this too. So if we hit this top button and down, we can get to, that's its original. This second two, this one I think is stretched out, and then this is 1-1, and that's 1-1. I think. So let's make it a little bigger. Let's do this one. The audio doesn't sound that great, and I don't remember how good the audio was for this game. It's been a long time. I did have it when I was a kid. But, as I'm playing through the viewfinder, I'm not really looking at the game console here, so as I'm running into things, don't think that I'm having, like, the buttons are delayed or something. It's just that, well, the screen's kind of delayed for me, what I'm looking at. But, it's playing, you know, maybe not that well. I don't think this is the way to play Game Gear. And maybe this isn't that good a quality of ROM file. I'm not sure, because I don't even hear him jumping. I think I was supposed to hear him jump. Anyhow, let's get out of there. You get an idea of that. Let's go ahead and Shining Force to it with the Game Boy Game Gear. And we'll try this ratio. Oh, this one seems a little more... I don't know, maybe the audio is just... I was going to say the audio sounds a little better, but I don't know. You know, when it gets down to the 8 bits, who knows? So yeah, I mean, Shining Force 2 is right there. That seems to be playing fine. If you want to play Game Gear, well, you can. You can play Game Gear. You can play NES. Let's go ahead and play some Contra. Seems to work. Let's turn it up a little. So Russ always does this thing where he does the Contra Test, and I don't think this guy's really passing the Contra Test because he moves around when he's ducking. But you know what? All my consoles and games seem to work fine if they pass the Contra Test or not. You know, maybe I'm just not that picky. Yeah, you know, it's alright. Again, that 8-bit audio sounds a little crackly, but this is emulation. And it's being done as kind of like an added bonus. Here's something that's really bad. You don't want to play PC Engine on here. I'll show you. It's just really slow. The Game Boy PC Engine. And I don't think the audio is supposed to sound like that either. It's all slowed down. Everything's real slow. And this is really what it's for, and what it does surprisingly well. I mean, it's built to do this. This is a Game Boy Advance in a sense. I haven't come across any Game Boy games that don't play. They all play. It's a Game Boy Advance being sold by Anbernic. How about we put in some Pokemon Psychic Adventures? It looks like it's running ROM hacks fine on a physical cartridge. Now here's something that we could try that this does that the Game Boy Advance can't do, and that's hot swapping. Supposedly, I can take this game cartridge out of here right now without turning it off and just pop in a new card. Let's see what happens. Interesting. See how it just rebooted itself there? And it rebooted itself again. I'm not touching any buttons. It went right into the next game. That's freaking sweet. So this is an actual Game Boy cartridge. This was a ROM hack. I hot swapped from one to the other. That's pretty awesome. How about some Mario Kart Short Circuit? Makes a little crunchy noise. but it hot swaps. That's pretty cool. You know, save some time. You don't have to be turning the buttons on and off so much. Alright y'all, so the last thing we need to do actually before we wrap things up is we need to do the TV test. I want to show you that this thing does work with the video out, and you can get an option, something like this. This is real cheap. I think I got this for $2.95 or something off of Amazon.com. Maybe it was like $5 or $7, I don't really remember, but it's a simple converter. It says upscaler. I don't know how much upscaling it'll do really, especially for that price, but just so happens to use the same cable that this device uses, which is handy in this regard. And we got a little 1080 720 switch. We're going to use this to connect that to my mini HD TV here, so we can give it all a good run for its money, so to speak. So first of all, I might as well just plug this bad boy in here. Okay, now that that's on there, we should just have to do this. And there it is. See that? Alright. Let's see what we can do here. This thing does have speakers on it, this little TV. I'll leave a link in the description if you want one of these. Alright, so you see there? So let's see if we can change the aspect ratio while we're in game here like this. So that would be, yeah. Look at that. Just doesn't seem to be any delay. Oh, there shouldn't be because it's a wire. Here we go, we're playing Pokemon Emerald on the TV using the upscaler. Works great. Alright y'all, so there it is, the Anbernic REVO K101 Plus, which is now re-released and available again in 2024 in a purplish blue. But it's the same device, and I wanted you all to see this because people are kind of trash talking this thing, and it's pretty cool. It's pretty awesome, actually. I don't really understand why people hate on it so much, except for people are getting so spoiled by all these new Chinese emulation handhelds. They're getting cheaper and cheaper, and heck, I've bought one for $15 that can play most of these games. They're not going to look or sound quite as good, for sure, but there's options out there. But the thing is, people don't understand how important it is and how awesome it is to be able to play Game Boy Advance cartridges on something that's not a Game Boy Advance. You know, everybody is going out and making these Game Boy clones. Now we got this new chromatic, we got the analog pocket, we've got, you know, Funny Playing made their Game Boy Color. None of them are, except for the analog, are doing Game Boy Advance though. You know? So the pluses about this thing are many. I've mentioned them all. The only downsides to it, to me, is that, and they're not really even that much of a downside, is you can't actually play physical Game Boy or Game Boy Color cards on here. Only Game Boy Advance and your K card. So you're going to have to do emulation if you want to do the Game Boy or Game Boy Color games. And you have this older style USB plug. A lot of people are upset about that, but you know what? I grew up in a time where every single device had its own charger. You couldn't share a charger with anything, so come on. Don't be so bratty about it. And it's, you know, it's even got a freaking link cable. That's not a downer. I'm just saying, I forgot to say, it's got a link cable, and you can actually connect this to a Game Boy or another K101 and trade Pokemon or whatever you want. I mean, the people that are complaining just don't know, or they didn't grow up around it, except for I know Russ did. So I don't know, he's overlooked something here. And I also like the volume wheel. So I think I've said a lot about this. I don't know if there's much more I could say without starting to repeat myself. If you guys want to see some more gameplay comparisons, I could do that. Oh, one more flaw is that the screen could be a little better. If you look at it at an angle, see how the color starts to fade? That's not too big of a gripe. But, you know, some screens have a slightly better viewable angle. But, I mean, I don't think that's much of a deal, you know. Anyhow, thanks so much for sticking around to the end of the episode. I really appreciate it. If you like this, hit the like button. Subscribe if you're not subscribed already. I really need those likes, and they bring me to the next level, you know what I mean? It's encouraging me to make more videos, so I'll catch you guys on the next one. Peace out.
Well, that was just childhood. We were all there together, and in denial would play like it was forever. And in the tall woods, we'd stay out of the weather like it was all good. Every day we made it for pleasure. We were saying whatever came to our minds, plain and simple like a tetherball reaching the sky. We were taking new heights on the swing while it was making us fly. Be the king of the hill and everything will be fine. The thrill of everything we would find, the innocence of a child.